Obergefreiter Klaus Hartmann stares at the intelligence report until the numbers blur into nonsense. 4,000 heavy bombers. Per month. Not per year, per month. He reads it again. Then a third time. Then he sets it down carefully, as if the paper itself might explode. It's March 1944, and deep in a Luftwaffe intelligence bunker outside Berlin, a small group of officers has just received confirmation of something they desperately wanted to disbelieve. The Americans aren't just building aircraft, they're building them faster than Germany can shoot them down, faster than seems physically possible. This is the story of the moment Nazi Germany's industrial confidence shattered against a wall of American steel, and the men who had to report the impossible truth to those who refused to hear it. If you're new here, welcome to World War II Tales, where we explore the overlooked moments that changed everything. Consider subscribing so you don't miss the stories history forgot to tell. The intelligence bunker smells of cigarette smoke, stale coffee, and something else, desperation maybe, or the acrid scent of fear disguised as routine. It's midnight on March 15, 1944, and Major Wilhelm Speer hasn't slept in 36 hours. His eyes burn, his hand shakes slightly as he reaches for another cigarette, though whether from exhaustion or what he's about to report, he can't say. Maps cover every surface of the concrete room. Reconnaissance photos are pinned in neat rows along the walls, arranged by date, by target, by factory complex. Each one tells the same impossible story. More bombers, always more bombers. Silver crosses filling the sky over Hamburg, over Schweinfurt, over Berlin itself. Wave after wave, day after day, and for every one the Luftwaffe shoots down, 2 more appear the next morning. Speer is Luftwaffe intelligence, assigned to industrial capacity assessment, which is a Wehrmacht euphemism for counting the enemy's aircraft and trying to predict how many his own pilots will face tomorrow, next week, next month. Last month, his team estimated American heavy bomber production at roughly 2,000 units monthly. The report was met with skepticism. High command called them alarmists. Göring's staff used harsher words, defeatists. Traitors to the Reich. The new photographs prove they were optimistic. Hartmann stands beside him now, younger by a decade. Technically, Speer's subordinate, but intellectually, his equal. He's pointing at an aerial reconnaissance image taken by a high-altitude Ju-86P 3 weeks ago over Michigan. The photograph required extraordinary risk, flying deep into American territory, beyond fighter range, betting everything on altitude and luck. The pilot didn't return, but he got the picture. Willow Run, a factory that shouldn't exist. The building stretches for over a mile. Not a complex of buildings, one building, longer than some German towns are wide, covering 67 acres under a single roof. In the photograph, you can see the railroad tracks running directly into the facility, the parking lots that hold 15,000 cars, the assembly bays arranged in perfect parallel rows. This one facility, Hartmann says quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, produces a B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. Speer doesn't respond immediately. His mind is calculating, running the mathematics that he knows will damn them both if spoken aloud. 1 bomber per hour, 24 hours in a day. Even accounting for maintenance windows, shift changes, quality inspections, holidays, 450 per month, Speer mutters. From one factory. Not quite. Hartmann slides another photograph across the table, then another, then another. We've now confirmed 31 major assembly facilities across the United States. Boeing in Seattle, 3 separate complexes, consolidated in San Diego and Fort Worth, Douglas in Oklahoma City and Long Beach. Ford has 3 plants, producing bombers. 3. This doesn't count the hundreds of component suppliers, the engine manufacturers, the propeller facilities. The fluorescent lights hum overhead, a sound that seems to grow louder in the silence that follows. Somewhere above them, 3 floors up, Berlin sleeps fitfully under blackout conditions, waiting for the next air raid siren. Somewhere west, beyond the Channel, beyond the Atlantic, beyond the edge of comprehension, a nation they've been told is soft and materialistic and racially inferior is building an air force larger than anything in human history. Speer picks up his pencil. His hands have stopped shaking now. There's a strange calm that comes with seeing the end written in numbers. He starts calculating production rates, attrition estimates, replacement capacity, training pipeline, crew losses, the mathematics of aerial warfare reduced to equations that should comfort him with their precision, but instead feel like counting the seconds until an avalanche hits. The pencil stops moving. If these numbers are accurate, he says slowly, each word chosen with the care of a man defusing a bomb, we cannot win an attrition war in the air. Not anymore. Possibly not ever. Possibly we never could have. Hartmann says nothing. They both know what this means. For 2 years, the Luftwaffe has bet everything on a simple equation: shoot down more than they can build, kill their crews faster than they can train replacements, make the cost unbearable, make the American public demand their sons come home, make the loss ratios so horrific that even American industrial capacity can't sustain the campaign. But if the enemy can absorb losses that would cripple Germany if they can lose 100 bombers in a week and replace them all by Friday afternoon, then courage doesn't matter. Skill doesn't matter. The ace who shoots down 50 bombers is just delaying the inevitable. The entire strategic calculus collapses. Who else knows? Speer asks. Oberkommando der Wehrmacht received our preliminary assessment 3 weeks ago. Göring's staff received the full report yesterday morning at 0900 hours. And? Hartmann's expression doesn't change, but something in his eyes, resignation maybe, or the exhausted acceptance of inevitable disaster, tells Speer everything before the words come. Reichsmarschall Göring believes we're inflating the numbers to excuse Luftwaffe failures. He believes we're— Hartmann pauses, choosing his words carefully, suffering from defeatist psychology, seeing enemies in shadows. Speer almost laughs. The sound comes out as something between a cough and a sob. He thinks we're lying. He thinks the Americans are lying, that the numbers are propaganda, impossible to achieve. He said, and I'm quoting the memo, "No nation of shopkeepers and mongrel races can produce what the report claims. The figures represent enemy psychological warfare, not industrial reality." Then he hasn't seen these. Speer taps the reconnaissance photos hard enough to hurt his finger. You can't fake a mile-long factory. You can't fake the bomber formations over Hamburg, over Schweinfurt, over— He's seen them. He doesn't believe them. For a long moment, neither man speaks. Outside, an air raid siren begins its nightly wail, a distant, almost routine sound now, part of the rhythm of life in the capital. The Americans will come tomorrow. They always come. They came yesterday. They'll come today. They'll come tomorrow. Wave after wave, silver crosses filling the sky like a plague of mechanical locusts, and for every one shot down, 2 more take its place, 3 more, 5 more. The numbers have become almost theological in their relentlessness. Hartmann pulls out another document, this one typed on official Wehrmacht stationery, stamped and counterstamped and signed by 3 different department heads. Production projections. By our most conservative estimates, and I mean conservative to the point of willful blindness, the United States will complete 16,000 heavy bombers this year. 16,000. Germany will complete perhaps 5,000 aircraft total. Fighters, bombers, transports, trainers, reconnaissance, everything combined. And that's assuming we maintain current production levels, which we won't, because they keep bombing our factories. And next year? Worse. Much worse. Their production capacity is still expanding. Ours is contracting. The curves are diverging. Speer sits down heavily in the metal chair that serves as the bunker's only furniture besides the map tables. He's 43 years old, a career officer who joined the Luftwaffe when it was the most technologically advanced air force on Earth. He remembers when 100 German bombers over Warsaw seemed like the wrath of God made manifest, when the Stuka's scream alone could break enemy formations, send soldiers running in blind panic. When Göring promised that no enemy bomber would ever reach Berlin, now his nation faces an enemy that can lose 300 bombers in a single week, the worst losses in aviation history, losses that should have broken any air force and barely notice. Can absorb those casualties and come back stronger the next week. Can lose more aircraft in a month than Germany can build in a year. We need to tell someone who'll listen, Speer says, finally. Who? Hartmann's question hangs in the stale air like smoke. Göring won't hear it. The Führer certainly won't. And anyone below them who admits defeat publicly. He doesn't finish. They both know the penalty for defeatism. They've both seen the reports. Officers shot for suggesting withdrawal. Soldiers hanged for speaking tactical reality. Truth has become treason, and mathematics has become propaganda. But they also know what happens when truth is suppressed long enough. When reality is declared heresy and facts are called lies. They know how this ends. Speer looks at the photographs again. At Willow Run, at Boeing's Seattle complex, at the Douglas plants stretching across Oklahoma. At the visual proof of industrial capacity so vast it seems like a trick of perspective, a manipulation of scale. But it's not a trick, it's real, every bit of it, and that's what makes it impossible to accept. 6,000 kilometers west, in a facility that shouldn't exist, Henry Ford is proving Klaus Hartmann right. Willow Run, Ypsilanti Township, Michigan. The same day, though here it's mid-afternoon, the March sun streaming through windows that span the length of the building. The factory floor stretches into the distance like a horizon, 3.5 million square feet of organized chaos, of controlled pandemonium, of industrial precision turned into something that looks almost organic in its complexity. 15,000 workers move in orchestrated rhythm, each performing a single specialized task perfected through thousands of repetitions. Rivet here, wire harness there. Hydraulic assembly at station 47. Engine mount at 63. It's an assembly line taken to its logical, terrifying conclusion. Henry Ford's innovation from automobile production scaled up and applied to 4-engine bombers. Every 63 minutes, a complete B-24 Liberator emerges from the final bay, 63 minutes from start to finish. Painted olive drab, engines tested and running, fuel tanks pressurized, bomb racks installed, ready to fly across an ocean and drop death on German cities. Charles Lindbergh walks the floor now, notebook in hand, pencil scratching observations. The famous aviator, controversial, isolated, accused of Nazi sympathies, but still technically serving as a civilian consultant, has seen aircraft production across America. Detroit, Seattle, San Diego, Wichita. He understands what he's witnessing here. It's not just fast, it's systematic, inevitable, inhuman in its efficiency. At Station 72, a woman named Dorothy Kowalski is installing oxygen system regulators. She's 31, mother of 2, husband overseas with the Third Army somewhere in England, preparing for an invasion that everyone knows is coming. 6 months ago, she'd never held a wrench, had never seen the inside of an aircraft, had been teaching 2nd grade at Roosevelt Elementary. Now her hands move with mechanical precision, muscle memory replacing conscious thought. Remove regulator from bin, check serial number, verify gasket integrity, apply thread compound, install and mount, torque to specification. Next, regulator, 45 seconds per unit, 6 regulators per aircraft, 4 aircraft per shift. She doesn't think about the numbers, doesn't think about the men who will fly in the plane she's helping build, or the men those bombs will fall on, or whether the boy she taught last year who wanted to be a pilot when he grew up will end up in one of these. She thinks about the rhythm, the sequence, the next task, get through the shift, pick up the kids from her mother's house, make dinner, sleep, repeat. This is American industrial warfare, not heroes, not valor, not the stuff of propaganda posters. Just the ruthless application of assembly line logic to the business of destroying cities, The same principles Ford used to make cars affordable for every family now used to make bombers faster than Germany can shoot them down. Lindbergh stops at the final inspection bay, where the completed bombers sit gleaming and new, smelling of fresh paint and hydraulic fluid and possibility. The bomber that emerges now is perfect in its uniformity, identical to the one before it, identical to the one that will follow in 63 minutes, identical to the hundreds already flying combat missions over Europe. He's flown dozens of aircraft types. Knows the personality each plane develops, the quirks and characteristics that make pilots swear some planes are lucky and others are cursed, knows how a good pilot learns his aircraft like a musician learns an instrument, attuned to every vibration and sound. These bombers have no personality. They're products, commodities, interchangeable units in an equation. And that, he realizes with something approaching horror, is the point. Germany builds aircraft like craftsmen, each plane slightly different, refined by hand, adjusted by skilled workers who take pride in their work. Each aircraft is a minor masterpiece of engineering. It's beautiful. It's skilled. It represents thousands of hours of specialized labor. It's losing. America builds aircraft like Ford builds cars. Interchangeable parts, unskilled labor, doing single repetitive tasks. Maximum efficiency, minimum training time. It's crude. It's inelegant. It lacks the sophistication of German engineering. It's winning. Lindbergh writes in his notebook, the pencil scratching across paper, trying to capture something he doesn't fully understand, but can see with perfect clarity. The German pilot trains for years to master a sophisticated machine built by craftsmen. The American system makes the machine simple enough that any pilot can fly it after basic training, and builds 10 for every one the Germans produce. Quality versus quantity is revealed as a false choice when quantity reaches this scale. At some point, quantity becomes its own quality. He watches another Liberator roll toward the exit, watches the tug pull it out onto the taxiway where test pilots will fly it for the first time. Another 63 minutes. Another 4 tons of bombs that will eventually fall on someone's city, someone's home, someone's children. The mathematics are brutal, undeniable, inhuman, and unstoppable. The assembly line doesn't care about courage or skill or tactical brilliance. It just runs. 1 bomber every 63 minutes. 4 per hour. 96 per day. 2,800 per month from this facility alone. And there are 30 other facilities doing the same thing. Back in Berlin, Wilhelm Speer is preparing his formal assessment for Oberkommando der Luftwaffe. It's April now. The American daylight raids have intensified to the point where they're no longer raids but rather a sustained campaign of industrial annihilation. Yesterday, 1,200 heavy bombers struck aircraft factories across Bavaria. The Luftwaffe managed to shoot down 63 of them, a respectable loss ratio by any standard, a victory by the metrics they've been using. By the time Speer finishes writing his report that evening, those 63 bombers have already been replaced on American assembly lines. The crews will take longer. Each man represents months of training, investment, institutional knowledge, but the aircraft themselves, already built, already tested, already being crated for shipment to England, he knows his conclusions will be ignored. Knows that admitting the war is industrially unwinnable, carries consequences that extend beyond professional censure into personal danger. But he writes anyway, because someone has to document what's actually happening. Someone has to create a record for future historians who will wonder how an entire nation could be so willfully blind. The words come slowly, each sentence weighed and measured. Current intelligence indicates monthly American heavy bomber production exceeding 4,000 units, with fighter production proportionally higher. Their manufacturing capacity shows no signs of reaching sustainable limits. Material shortages that constrain German production, chromium, rubber, aluminum, skilled labor, appear absent from their industrial equation. The United States possesses advantages we cannot match. geographic isolation from strategic bombing, unrestricted access to raw materials, a massive trained workforce expanded by female labor mobilization, and most critically, an industrial philosophy that prioritizes quantity and speed over perfection. Our loss ratios, while initially favorable, cannot be sustained indefinitely. Current attrition rates. For every enemy aircraft destroyed, 2.3 new aircraft enter service. For every enemy crew killed, 1.8 replacement crews complete training. Meanwhile, our own production remains static or declining due to strategic bombing, material shortages, and increasingly desperate resource allocation to other sectors. Conclusion: industrial parity is impossible within any realistic time frame. Strategic recalculation necessary. He doesn't write what that recalculation should be. He's an intelligence officer, not a strategist, and besides, everyone knows what it means. There's only one way to respond when the industrial mathematics become impossible: surrender. The word hangs unwritten in the spaces between his careful phrasing. The implication hovers like a ghost behind every statistic. The report goes up through channels. It sits on desks. It gets stamped and filed and forgotten. Some lieutenant somewhere adds it to a folder marked Industrial Assessment, Enemy Production, and places it in a filing cabinet, where it will remain until American troops liberate the building 15 months later. 3 weeks after Speer submits his report, Göring gives a speech to Luftwaffe officers insisting that American production figures are Jewish propaganda and physically impossible for a nation of degenerates and shopkeepers. Hartmann finds Speer in the bunker afterward, listening to the radio broadcast, the Reichsmarshal's voice booming with confidence that sounds increasingly desperate. "He's not stupid," Hartmann says quietly, turning off the radio. "He knows the numbers. He's seen the same intelligence we have." Then why? Because admitting it means admitting we've already lost. And if we've already lost, if defeat is mathematically certain, then every death from this point forward is murder, not war. Every city bombed is a crime, not a military necessity. Every pilot shot down is a waste, not a sacrifice. Speer stares at the map on the wall, at the red marks indicating bombed factories, destroyed rail yards, obliterated cities. So we just keep fighting? Knowing we can't win? We keep fighting because stopping means admitting we were wrong. About everything, about German superiority, about destiny, about the fundamental assumptions that started this war. Hartmann lights a cigarette, his hands steady. The mathematics say we've lost, but accepting the mathematics means accepting that everything we've been told is a lie, that our ideology is false, that we've destroyed half of Europe for nothing. Above them, the air raid sirens begin again. Another night, another wave of bombers that shouldn't exist, built by factories that couldn't be real, flown by men who are replaced faster than they can be killed. The mathematics have become theology. To question them is heresy. To accept them is despair. So the reports continue. The counts continue. The war continues. And every 63 minutes, another Liberator rolls off the assembly line at Willow Run, adding one more number to an equation that Germany refuses to solve. By June 6, 1944, D-Day, the gap has become an abyss. The Allied air forces over Normandy field over 13,000 aircraft, fighters, bombers, transports, reconnaissance planes, an aerial armada so vast that soldiers on the beaches will later report the sky itself seemed to turn silver. The Luftwaffe manages fewer than 300 sorties on the first day, 300 against 13,000. It's not cowardice. German pilots attack anyway, throwing themselves against impossible odds with the kind of desperate courage that accomplishes nothing except adding names to casualty lists. It's not incompetence. Many of these pilots are aces, veterans with dozens of kills, men who've forgotten more about aerial combat than most Allied pilots will ever learn. It's mathematics. You cannot fight an equation with bravery. You cannot overcome production capacity with skill. You cannot defeat an industrial system with individual heroism. In his bunker, Speer maintains his counts, updates his projections, documents the widening chasm between what Germany can produce and what America already has in service, waiting in reserve, rolling off assembly lines. His latest report marked secret and, for command eyes only, though both designations have become meaningless estimates that by year's end, the United States will have built more heavy bombers in 12 months than Germany has built total military aircraft since 1939. He sends the report through channels. It joins the others, unread, unfiled, forgotten. Hartmann has stopped submitting detailed estimates entirely. When asked for numbers, he provides them. Raw data, no analysis, no conclusions, no recommendations. Just columns of figures that speak for themselves to anyone willing to listen. No one is willing to listen. Instead, he watches the reconnaissance photos when they still come in, though those are rarer now. The high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft that could reach America are gone, shot down or grounded by fuel shortages. The last photographs are from May. They show factory expansions, new assembly plants. The Americans aren't even slowing down to enjoy their victory. They're accelerating. Boeing is breaking ground on a facility in Wichita. Consolidated is expanding San Diego. Douglas is adding a third shift at Long Beach. The production curve isn't leveling off. It's steepening. They're not building for this war, Hartmann realizes one night, staring at the photographs spread across the table. They're building for the next one. Speer looks up from his calculations, red-eyed and exhausted. What? Look at the numbers. They're producing aircraft faster than they're losing them, much faster. They're actually accumulating excess capacity. By spring 45, if the war continues, they'll have more bombers than they have targets to bomb, more fighters than they need for air superiority. They're building beyond necessity. So, why continue production at this rate? Because they can. Because once you build a machine this large, stopping it is harder than running it. Because shutting down Willow Run means laying off 15,000 workers, and they'd rather keep them employed building aircraft they don't need than face the political cost of unemployment. Hartmann trails off, staring at the photographs of Willow Run, of Boeing's Seattle complex, of the Douglas plants sprawling across Oklahoma like industrial cities. Because this is what they do, he finishes quietly. This is their form of warfare. Not strategy, not tactics, not operational brilliance, just overwhelming industrial capacity applied without hesitation, without doubt, without the slightest concern for elegance or efficiency. They're not trying to build the perfect bomber. They're trying to build enough bombers that perfection becomes irrelevant. Speer thinks about this, about assembly lines that dwarf German cities, about women installing oxygen regulators every 45 seconds without knowing what the final product does, about factories producing finished bombers faster than German plants can produce engine components, about an enemy that turned war into manufacturing and manufacturing into an unstoppable force. We never had a chance, he says. Not bitterly, not with resignation, just stating fact, the way he'd state the temperature or time of day, a simple observation about reality. Hartmann doesn't respond. There's nothing to say. The numbers have been saying it since 1943, since 1942 really, if anyone had been willing to listen. Since Pearl Harbor, arguably, when America's industrial capacity turned from cars and refrigerators to tanks and bombers. The war will continue for another year. Men will die in numbers that dwarf the aircraft production figures they've been tracking. Cities will burn. The Luftwaffe will fight with desperate courage and increasing futility, individual pilots racking up impossible kill counts that mean nothing against the endless silver waves. But the outcome was decided in the factories, in the assembly lines, in the simple, brutal arithmetic of a nation that could turn its industrial base toward total war without slowing, without faltering, without a moment's doubt. Every 63 minutes, every single day, until the numbers became so large they stopped meaning anything at all except defeat. May 1945. The war is over. Wilhelm Speer sits in an American prisoner of war facility outside Frankfurt, sorting through captured Luftwaffe documents at the request of his captors. His intelligence assessments are being reviewed by U.S. Army Air Force's analysts who want to understand what the Germans knew, when they knew it, and how their leadership responded to accurate intelligence. An American Major Johnston, from Ohio, with an easy manner that seems almost obscene after years of Prussian military formality, spreads out Speer's reports from 1,944 across a wooden table. These production estimates, Johnston says, tapping the March report. 4,000 heavy bombers monthly. You were conservative. I was told I was exaggerating, that the numbers were impossible. You weren't exaggerating. Peak production was 4,500 in March 44, closer to 5,000 by the end of the year. We actually had to slow down production in early 45 because we were running out of storage space for completed aircraft. Johnston shakes his head, something like wonder in his expression. Your own leadership didn't believe you? Would yours? If someone told you the enemy was producing aircraft at a rate that seemed physically impossible, that contradicted everything you understood about industrial capacity? Johnston considers this. He's from Dayton, grew up near Wright Field, has relatives who worked at the Frigidaire plant that converted to aircraft production. He's seen the facilities. Toured Willow Run during a War Department inspection. He knows the scale because he's lived inside it, but he also knows how it sounds when you try to explain it to someone who hasn't seen it. How the numbers sound like propaganda even when they're true. I suppose not, he admits. I suppose we'd have called them defeatist too. Speer looks at his old reports, the careful documentation, all those projections and estimates and warnings written in the desperate hope that someone, somewhere, would listen. He'd been conservative, trying to maintain credibility with superiors he knew were skeptical. He'd underestimated anyway. The mathematics were clear by early 1944, Speer says. Anyone willing to accept them would have seen the inevitable conclusion. We simply weren't willing. Couldn't be willing, perhaps. The truth was incompatible with our ideology. Would it have changed anything if Göring had believed you? If Hitler had accepted your analysis? For a long moment, Speer doesn't answer. He thinks about the pilots who flew against impossible odds, about the cities that burned, about the civilians who died in the year of war that followed his unheeded warnings, about whether truth, spoken clearly enough, can ever compete with comfortable lies. No, he says finally. By the time I wrote those assessments, the equation was already unsolvable. We'd have needed to accept defeat in 43, maybe 42. Certainly before your production truly accelerated and your bomber crews gained experience. By 44, we weren't fighting to win. We were fighting because surrender meant admitting everything we'd believed was false. So you won battles while losing the war. We won tactically while losing strategically, kept scoring impressive victories, shooting down dozens of bombers, stopping local offensives, maintaining defensive lines while the arithmetic of defeat accumulated behind us like compound interest. Every day we fought well made the final defeat more catastrophic. Johnston gathers the reports carefully, treating them with the respect due to historical documents now rather than enemy intelligence. They'll be filed away, shipped to archives in America, become part of the official record, evidence of a war that was lost in factories before it was lost on battlefields. For what it's worth, Johnston says, your estimates were the most accurate intelligence Germany produced about American capabilities. You just had the misfortune of being right about something no one wanted to hear. After Johnston leaves, Speer sits alone with his thoughts in the quiet room. He thinks about Hartmann, who survived the war and is somewhere in a British POW camp awaiting denazification screening. About Göring, awaiting trial at Nuremberg for crimes that have nothing to do with ignoring production reports. About the assembly line at Willow Run, probably still running even now, building bombers for a war that's over simply because that's what the machine does and no one has told it to stop. He thinks about the last calculation he made in April 1945, days before the surrender. America had produced over 96,000 military aircraft during the war. Germany had managed roughly 90,000 total, but that wasn't the real gap. The real gap was that America could have built more. Their production was limited only by how many factories they chose to build, how many workers they chose to train, how much steel they chose to allocate. They'd fought the war at partial mobilization, industrially speaking, never truly straining their capacity. They'd built enough to overwhelm Germany while still producing cars and refrigerators and maintaining civilian quality of life. They could have built twice as many aircraft if they'd needed to, 3 times as many. The limit wasn't industrial capacity but strategic necessity. Germany had fought at maximum capacity from 1943 onward and still been buried under American production. The numbers had been impossible. The numbers had been right. And that, ultimately, was the story. Not of heroes or villains, not of superior tactics or brilliant strategy, but of a machine so large, so efficient, so relentless, that opposing it was like opposing mathematics itself, like arguing with gravity or disputing the multiplication tables. You can't fight an equation. You can only lose to it, one bomber at a time, every 63 minutes, until the arithmetic of war reaches its inevitable conclusion. The numbers, in the end, speak for themselves. Willow Run continued production until June 1945, completing 8,685 B-24 Liberators. At peak efficiency, the facility produced one bomber every 55 minutes, even faster than the 63 minutes that seemed impossible to German intelligence in 1944. The United States manufactured 18,482 B-24 seconds total during the war, more than any other military aircraft model in history. This single aircraft type outnumbered Germany's entire heavy bomber production for the war. Total American aircraft production 1,941 to 1,945, 300,000, 317 units. German production, same period, 119,307 units. But even these numbers don't capture the full disparity. America built those aircraft while maintaining substantial civilian production, while feeding allies through Lend-Lease, while maintaining a standard of living that actually increased during the war. Germany built theirs while straining every resource, while strip mining conquered territories, while working slave laborers to death in underground factories. The lesson wasn't subtle. Industrial capacity, properly mobilized, could overwhelm tactical brilliance. The assembly line, applied to warfare, made courage and skill almost irrelevant at sufficient scale. Quality could not compete with quantity once quantity reached a certain threshold. Wilhelm Speer's intelligence reports were declassified in the 1,970 seconds. Military historians now cite them as textbook examples of accurate strategic assessment in the face of institutional denial. His estimates of American production capacity, once dismissed as defeatist propaganda, were proven conservative. He'd reported impossible numbers and still underestimated reality. The arithmetic of defeat he documented became the blueprint for understanding modern industrial warfare. Logistics determines outcomes, production capacity wins wars, and sometimes the most important battles happen in factories where no one fires a shot and no one wears a uniform. Every 63 minutes, the truth rolled off an assembly line in Michigan. Germany spent 2 years refusing to believe it. The numbers, as always, didn't care. They just kept accumulating, one bomber at a time, until impossible became inevitable and mathematics became destiny. If you found this story compelling, there are dozens more like it on this channel. Battles decided by overlooked details, strategic errors that changed everything, and the moments between chaos and understanding that defined World War II. Subscribe so you don't miss the stories that textbooks skip. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.